Afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here again today. Got a few interesting companies to listen to here. I did a talk yesterday, so I'm not going to just sort of regurgitate the same stuff. I'm going to keep it kind of short and sweet today, I think. I did want to add a couple of reminders. One is that registration has opened on the Metal Investor Forum site for the January show. So if you guys want to register early for that, it's probably a good idea, since these things do tend to fill up, as you probably noticed. I'd also remind you about the Kitco Insider, because that's just a free thing, but that's part of what will give you access, and one way to get archived access to the videos of all the presentations that are being done here. Kitco will be loading all of those up. I went through the macro yesterday, so I'm not going to go there again. I'm going to mention generally that there's 7 or 8 companies that I follow here, and I would say they, in a broad sense, they fall into a couple of different categories. One is sort of development level, you could call it. Ones where you're hoping to get value from improvement in the resource, but you're also effectively betting on the commodity, which in a sense you always are with these stocks, but it's perhaps more direct with some of those development stories. Those ones, as Joe talked about yesterday, and I very much agree with him, the market is in very short supply when it comes to good quality resources, and someone that can find one, they're definitely going to have a target on their back. These companies will get taken out because there really aren't that many good resources around there, and it doesn't really matter which metal you're talking about. They're all pretty much in the same boat that way. The other group of companies, and there's several here that fit the description, is explorers. I was born the son of a mining executive. My brother was an explorationist. He and I actually had an exploration consulting firm for a few years before we started the newsletter. I love the process of discovery, and again, because I think there is a real shortage of quality deposits, there is room to do extremely well if you're lucky enough to latch onto one of these things early in its history when the discovery is being made. I try not to give my subscribers any illusions about the risk level of what we're dealing with. These are high risk securities. That's just that's how it is. You want the kind of moonshots you can get from an exploration stock. You've got to accept the risk that comes with it. And I'd like to think, and because I've had a conversation with a few, that most of my readers recognize that I berate them over and over and over again, that I try to find these things early. And the ideal situation, if you're playing exploration stocks, drill specs as I call them, you try to find them early, you try to find them before the market really latches onto them. And once I've started talking to my readers about a stock, I've got no compunction about going around and arm waving about it to get the market to notice it once they've bought it. And if the market gives you 200 or 300% gains pre-results, which it's done for a lot of stuff on my list this year, the thing that you do is you do enough selling so that you've basically taken your money off the table and you're playing with house money. The best situation you can have if you want to play drill specs is to try to trade them so that when the results start coming, even if they don't work out, and understand most of the time they won't work out. That's exploration. Most of the time it doesn't work. If it was as simple as companies make it sound like it is when they're pitching you on their stock, copper would be 2 cents and gold would be a nickel. Like it's not that easy to find this stuff. That's why it's expensive. It's hard. But if you can set up that situation, and to my mind, the ideal combination, and it's what I talk to readers about, is have a combination of strong stories that have pounds or ounces in the ground that they can improve, make themselves either takeover targets. In some cases, I'm quite happy to follow a stock through to production. But I recognize that the skill set required to find and develop deposits is quite a bit different from the skill set required to mine them profitably. And quite frankly, in my opinion, most exploration companies that try to become producers rue the day they came up with that idea, because it tends to end badly. There's a good reason why most of these guys are happy to be taken over by a producer because it's just a completely different skill set. And just because you're good at finding deposits does not mean you're going to be good at mining them. And often you're probably better off not trying. So I prefer to know guys are going for the takeout, frankly. Because that's the best exit for everybody. So I can rattle a bunch of names off, but I mean, I will tell you that everyone you're looking at this table happens to be companies that I follow. One of them has a resource. The three other guys are fairly early stage. I mean, Calnex has a discovery, which I think is really very impressive looking from one hole. But that camp, Flin Flon's a camp that's generated a lot of high quality, high value deposits. And it's and because of the infrastructure, because basically if you find something, you've got a willing buyer literally next door, it's tended to deliver fairly good value. Like I followed the original Callinan before they split and Callinex became the exploration arm. Callinan was a very successful pick for David and I almost 20 years ago now, probably, when the 777 deposit was being discovered and developed, because it was just very high quality, very high value, very high return deposit. VMSs are nice that way. They can generate very high value per ton. Almadex next to them, as you probably figured out, I'm kind of doing the introduction now, and I'll just give these guys quick 30-second ones when the time comes, when the time comes. The Atamura, I think, is a very interesting story too. I mean, the thing with the exploration business is it's very cyclical. It's not easy. It's not an easy business to be in. I got a lot of respect and a lot of time for guys like Mark Kolobaba. It was a long, ugly bear market, and he made a lot of sacrifices, I happen to know, to pull his company through it, to get it through to the other side. He's got a vision for that area. It's an early stage new model. I think it's a really interesting model. I think it makes more sense than the model that's being applied regionally, even though this is a place that's actually got 2 or 3 mines, current and past producers. I think the model under which those were assumed to have been generated, I think the model is different. What Mark's working on makes sense to me. He's going to be generating a lot of targets in the very, very near term. And I would, in case he forgets to remind you, I will remind you that the Republic area in northeastern Washington, he doesn't really have that many seasonality issues there, because it's a fairly, there's lots of infrastructure and it's a fairly low precipitation area. I mean, he'd probably have to use water trucks if he was drilling in January or February, but he's going to have to anyway. Even if it doesn't matter what time of year, it's not an area with a lot of nearby lakes and ponds. So water truck's a reality in that part of the world, but I don't think drilling in the winter is going to be that difficult. So I just want to remind people that if you're thinking, if you look at the map and go, okay, Mark's going to have targets, but he's not going to drill until next summer, I don't think it's going to be that long. Not if I have anything to say about it. Trust me, once he's got the targets, someone's going to be bugging him to drill, and you're looking at him. Next to him, I mean, I asked Almadex to come back and do their presentation again. We were a little embarrassed about the whole presentation slide disappearing act yesterday. We're not quite sure what happened there, but somehow it went poof off the AV computers. So we thought, in fairness, we should give Morgan a chance to give the presentation with the slides behind him, because what he was saying does make a lot more sense if you can see the slides behind him. Again, this is another group that, it's a group of discoverers. This is guys that have spent their working lives, he and his father, exploring, and successfully. I mean, if you take a look at Almaden and Almadex, Almaden still exists. It's moving their discovery in Mexico gold project through. Ixtaca is sort of being moved through the feasibility process, but Almadex is a spin-off of that, all the exploration properties. But it's interesting if you look at the projects in that group, and you look at the number of those projects that have resources. I would say at least a couple of them. One was small-scale production in BC, but a couple of other ones in Mexico probably will go into production. Their hit-miss ratio, their batting average, if you will, is actually extremely high for explorers. I mean, I've always been very impressed at how high the success ratio is for the Pollockman family, if you will. It's much higher than average, believe me. It's way higher than average. And that alone makes them worth following. The last company on the list here, I mean, GMV it was interesting. I mean, I found it through a metallurgy release, which is kind of an unusual way to pick projects, I agree. And the reason for that is that when you're dealing with low-grade deposits, they can be high margin, they can be very successful, but when you're dealing with low-grade deposits, any kind of low-grade deposit, it doesn't take much to kill it. As my friends Joe and Brent will tell you, I mean, Brent and Joe are all about finding the red flags, and that's the reason why they follow companies, and they tend to drop them fairly rapidly. It's not because they're fickle, it's because they're always looking for the red flags, and there's plenty of them. Metallurgy is often one. It's often a problem. I just found it because this project was reported extremely good metallurgical results. There's 2 or 3 more phases of metallurgy need to be done, but if those results turn out to be true to form, it's potentially what's called a run-of-mine operation, which essentially means you don't have a big complicated crushing circuit. And that makes a lot of difference in terms of OPEX, it makes a lot of difference in terms of CAPEX. And because of that, it's not a huge deposit, but because of that potential for excellent metallurgy and low CAPEX, a deposit of that size that's a little over 500,000 ounces could still be quite a profitable deposit, quite a high NPV for its size. It's also in a place in Arizona where I don't think they're going to have a lot of problems. It just seems like the locals are pretty amenable to it. I mean, there aren't many locals. That's one thing that's helpful. I think it's mainly rangeland, and the ranchers seem to be quite happy to have these guys doing stuff, and they'd probably be equally happy to be bought out when the time comes, if that's how it ends. They don't seem to have any problem with that idea. So, I mean, basically it's in a good jurisdiction. They're drilling. Are you drilling yet? The drill's turning now, right? Yeah, the drilling. So there'll be expansion drilling there to try to make it bigger. But again, it's one that's got an exploration. It's got an exploration side to the story because all of these resources are on what's called Mexican Hat Hill. That's basically where there's exposure. The rest of the project is pretty much flat as a board. There's no outcrop. So they're doing. I know they just finished doing a soil survey. Are the geophysical guys there now? Tomorrow. Okay, there you go. The geophysicists start tomorrow. There's a very large company called Zong that's actually based in Tucson, which is the closest city. It's a well-known geophysical group. They're going to come out and they're basically going to. They think they know what will see these zones. They're going to come out. They're going to run a couple of test lines on the hillside. Dave Webb, the guy running the program, is down there, and he said basically they're going to show me the results, and if they convince me that yes, this AMT system sees these zones, he's going to say, fine, go for it, go in the flats and see if you can see something else. So I like the fact it's got that exploration sense to it too. And I mean, that's basically I'm just going to talk about the companies that are here right now, but there's several others that I follow that, I'd say probably about 8 of the companies here are ones that I follow, companies like Precipitate, and you'll see there's a lot of things in common in our exploration stories. I mean, I like exploration stories, and I think it's the high risk, but it's a high return into the business. If you trade them well, there's room for extremely large gains in a good market. But you just got to be smart and try to be sure that you control your costs, and you've got to be disciplined. I mean, I can tell you, I've followed more things up and down than I care to remember, scores if not hundreds over the years. That's why I tend to. I say it ad nauseum, I'm sure, to most of my subscribers, but it's really important to be disciplined about taking money off the table and trying to play with house money. That's ultimately what you want to be doing. And having said all that, I know that it's sort of people usually expect a promoter joke out of me. I can't imagine why that is, but I don't have a promoter joke today, but I have something similar. So, and it's similar to the theme of a promoter joke. Some of you have probably heard from me before, and it happens in the same place. So, our friend St. Peter is standing in front of the pearly gates, and 2 guys come floating up. One of them's pretty dressed up, high end. Obviously, guy's got a $50,000 watch on, really nice suit. The other guy's a reverend. He's a priest. These 2 guys float up together. They're standing next to each other, and St. Peter, he looks to the guy first in the suit and goes, we're really happy you're here, John. I mean, sorry you had to die to get here, but we're really happy you're here. Like, we've got everything set up for you. Your reservation's great. He hands him this, beautiful raw silk robe, like, an Armani robe, and this huge golden cross to carry around, because apparently they do that in heaven, and sends him on his way. Gives him the all access pass. So the Reverend's sitting there watching this, and he's kind of going, "Oh God, this is pretty good. This is a good deal." And so St. Peter, turns to him and says, we really appreciate, we know you did all that work, all that hard work for for to try to get people in here while you were alive, and we really appreciate it, and we're glad you came, and obviously we're welcoming you to heaven. And he hands him this kind of crappy sackcloth robe and this kind of wooden cross, and the Reverend looks at this and he goes like, what? Like, what? That guy's a son of Mammon. The guy's a portfolio manager. That's what he did all of his life. You hand him this Armani robe and this giant golden cross. I spent the last 50 years, tending to my flock, giving sermons every weekend, getting people to believe in you and to believe in heaven and help them get here. And I get the crappy robe and the wooden cross. Like, what's up with that? St. Peter looks at him and he kind of sighs and he goes, look, don't get me wrong. He said, there's been some changes here. We're sort of a results-based organization now. I don't think we don't appreciate all of your hard work. But he said, look, you probably noticed when you were giving the sermons on Sunday, people's eyes would get heavy and they'd nod off, and you weren't really gripping. They weren't really paying attention. I'm not sure they were really more devout after they listened to you. And the Reverend goes, well, yeah, but I'm a Reverend, so how could that be any worse than a fund manager? You got to be kidding me. I mean, that guy's just a money guy. And St. Peter said, well, that's where the results-based thing comes in. He said, I won't say that he's the most devout guy ever, but the simple truth of the matter is, every time he sends out a quarterly statement, everybody prays. Okay, who's first? You? Okay. We're gonna start with Calinex, the zinc discovery.